Well, it looks as though it just keeps on getting worse for the BBC. Yet another video on them and yet another scandal and expose showing their bias and showing their lies. Now, it was only this morning that we brought you the story via the Telegraph that the BBC had been exposed for fabricating and doctoring a video to show Donald Trump incite violence in the Capitol on January 6th back in 2021. Scandalous, and in fact it's got a lot of the world absolutely outraged. Obviously Donald Trump Jr. has stepped in on this and of course called the BBC fake news and full of shit. Their reputation globally is in the mud. We've seen Elon Musk call them out many times. Within the United Kingdom, well, we are kind of forced to pay a TV license fee, but we're seeing their ratings drop. We're also seeing people not wanting to partake in paying for this service because they are biased. And not only that, they also have done some horrible stuff historically. But now, this time, there's another expose with regard to them, which we're going to be discussing in today's video. But as always, please do hit the like button and hit the subscribe button for more. And if you haven't already followed my Instagram, please do. It's DanPWD. Let's get into it. You've seen the state of this country. Now wear the message. Wankir, Stuck Farmer, Liber. Shop the full collection by going down into the link in the description or heading over to BritishDan.com. So as you can see, guys, the BBC pushed Hamas lies around the world and chose to minimize Israeli suffering in Gaza documentary as broadcaster deemed not safe. Let's get on over there to this and have a little look at what is being said. This is via the Telegraph.
Would you publicly accuse someone of a crime when you had no independent witnesses to it? Well, you almost certainly wouldn't, especially if you had prior knowledge of someone else being to blame. But that's exactly what the BBC has been accused of doing to Israel in this dossier. And the author of this dossier? Well, it's a former member of the broadcaster's own Editorial Standards Committee. This is the latest set of troubling allegations to hit the BBC as part of a Telegraph investigation into claims the broadcaster's coverage has systemic problems over impartiality. So let's get into it. In April and June 2024, the BBC published two stories about the discovery of mass graves at Al-Nasser and Al-Shifa hospitals in Gaza. According to the internal BBC dossier, the articles strongly implied that Israeli forces had buried bodies at both sites prior to withdrawing from the area. The articles also mentioned alleged evidence of war crimes, including bodies found with their hands tied and gunshot wounds to their heads. But the BBC's own Editorial Standards Committee was told that this narrative was wrong. The memo says that the most likely explanation is that the mass graves were dug by Palestinians themselves and the people buried there had died or been killed prior to the arrival of the Israeli ground forces. So, the BBC made a mistake. Well, perhaps. But the committee argues that the broadcaster knew that Palestinians were burying their dead at these sites before the Israeli raids. Several months earlier, the BBC itself reported on Palestinians digging mass graves, and geolocation clearly places the two burial sites in roughly the same area. Now, whatever your personal views may be on the actions of Israel in Gaza, implying a country committed war crimes when there is evidence to the contrary has serious ramifications, not least because it could erode the credibility of genuine war crime claims at a later date. How can we expect anyone to develop an informed or nuanced opinion when the BBC is only presenting them with some of the facts? That is perhaps the most damning takeaway of all.
Well, I mean, it's clear as day that they've got a bias. We've been saying it for many years. And I've been saying it a lot of the times here on this channel. I mean, they've got a narrative. It's a far left narrative. Someone is telling them to push that sort of agenda, to push that sort of propaganda to the people. And of course, they're abiding by their sort of script. They also deemed to say that they've got their own fact checker. They went out and criticized majority of journalism out there in the world. However, this fact checker doesn't seem to be working because of the whole Donald Trump situation. This and the Telegraph are probably going to be exposing some more as the days go on. But this just goes to show how deep and dark and twisted the BBC are And as stated, they pushed Hamas lies around the world and chose to minimize Israeli suffering in Gaza. This also comes as they're saying that the channel had a desire to always to believe the worst about Israel, while giving unjustifiable weight to Hamas claims about the death toll in Gaza. Speaking with the Telegraph's former director of the BBC television, Danny Cohen, said that the BBC was not safe in the hands of its current managers, who should hang their heads in shame and resign. Having made such serious and misleading journalistic errors, BBC executives chose to hide them from the public rather than correct them on record. Protecting the BBC's reputations came before the duties and principles enshrined in the BBC's charter obligations. That the BBC has helped to push Hamas lies around the world and fueled anti-Semitism at home, and that cannot be now in doubt. So as you can see, they're up to it. They're up to their eyeballs in it, the BBC. Now, I want to see what happens with the Donald Trump situation, because he's, of course, sued ABC for a lot of money. And I can imagine that coming the BBC's way very, very soon by looking at Donald Trump Jr.'s response earlier on this morning. And with this, you know how dangerous this is. How it leads to sort of brainwashing and psyoping people. They already psyop a lot of the population anyway with their narratives. And again today, Tommy Robinson, of course, I know a lot of supporters of Tommy Robinson, of course, do follow this channel. Of course, there was a big bit of news with regard to him today, but the way that they report on things is the same sort of narrative, and calling him this, look, far-right activist. Tommy Robinson found not guilty of terror offence after not giving UK police access to his phone. Again, using this kind of narrative every single time, but this is their bias. This is what they're going on about. And we've seen with Tommy Robinson before, in fact, with regard to sort of Paranama, in his own situation. He did a massive expose on one of their journalists a long time ago. But again, here's another time where Tommy Robinson, they also had this guy, this BBC journalist, of course, was confronted by Tommy Robinson. But yeah, you know what they're like. They can't, they're struggling to accept that he's innocent because they've been trying to paint a picture on him. So, long story short, they have a far left narrative and a far left viewpoint and push that propaganda onto the people without checking. They are biased completely, and the taxpayer is almost forced to pay for this bullcrap. It's really, really shocking. But on the Tommy Robinson stuff, I mean, good news, very, very good news from him. Of course, he announced, of course, that he is not guilty, and so he shouldn't be. I mean, you know, he was given a charge or had to appear in court over not giving his PIN to his phone, and was charged under terrorism legislation. However, a guy that mass stabs people on a train is not deemed a terrorist. It doesn't make any sense, does it? But good news for Tommy Robinson, and I'm glad that, of course, he has got what he deserved. He said, let me remind you that I have another trial, though, in October 2006. That isn't even more insane than this case. I face 10 years in prison for the next offence. It's all lawfare. It's targeted harassment. And even if you win, then the process is the punishment. We fight on. So he's got another trial date to come up soon as well. Absolutely shocking. But I suppose he can breathe for this time. Tommy Robinson obviously publicly thanked Elon Musk, who of course paid for the legal fees, which led him to walking away a free man. So credit where credit is due to Elon Musk there as well. But guys, do let me know your thoughts on the latest expose of the BBC down there in the comments. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you all later. Take care. Peace.